epiphany that I needed to prove my own innocence. But when I wanted to, since Mark, I'm up here and he's an attorney and there's a few attorneys in the room, I thought I would tell you about a story about the first lawyer I ever had. Now, picture a prison visiting room with a glass partition, and there's an archway on one side of this brick wall and an archway on the other side of the brick wall. And my attorney, who's going to defend me because they're going to seek the death penalty in my case, sits in front of the brick wall. And the first thing out of his mouth, he says, "Kirk, you're in a lot of trouble." I thought that was very astute of him. And he goes on and he says, "But don't worry, I know my way around the criminal justice system and I know my way around the courtroom. And we're going to find our way out of this problem together." So I started feeling a little better. You know, we talk about the case for about 20 minutes, and right before he gets ready to leave, he reiterates the same thing he said in the beginning. He says, "Kirk, don't worry. I know my way around the courtroom, and I know my way around the criminal justice system, and we're going to find our way out of here together." So he put his hand on the glass, you know, to say goodbye. He picked up his briefcase, turned around, and ran right into the wall. He was right about one thing. I'm in a lot of trouble. But, and I don't know how much time I have, you all. Anybody? Larry, how much time?
10, 15.
But on August 9th, 1984, at 2:45 a.m., it wasn't funny at all. Open up, it's the Baltimore County Police Department. You had the warrant for the arrest of Kirk Bloodsworth. I go to the door, there's flashlights in my face. They got 9 millies standing outside. "Step outside, Mr. Bloodsworth. You're under arrest for the rape and murder of 9-year-old Dawn Hamilton, you son of a bitch." Handcuffed me from behind my back, stuck me in a police car, and that was the last time I seen Cambridge, Maryland, where I grew up as a crab fisherman in a family of fishermen for 8 years, 11 months, and 19 days. 2 years on death row. I was honorably discharged out of the Marine Corps. I had never been arrested for anything. I, was just dumbstruck by the whole thing, and nobody would listen to me. Not the police, not my own lawyer, and certainly he didn't know where he was going. And it was just one terrible thing after another. So I tried to do the best thing I could. Now, let me just get into the case a little bit. The description of the last person seen with Dawn Hamilton is as follows: 6'5", curly blonde hair, bushy mustache, tan skin, and skinny. Well, I'm not 6'5". Certainly was 230 pounds. My hair was as red as a fire plug. I had sideburns down to here. I wore glasses all my life from the age of 5 years old. I had a missing tooth in the front, and none of this was ever stated in the court. Now, the 2 main witnesses in the case, and there was 5 identification witnesses in all. I was identified by 5 people who positively identified me as the last person seen with Dawn Hamilton. Now, I was arrested on a Thursday. The 2 main witnesses in the case were 2 little boys. One was 10, one was 8 years old. Now, this is what they do. They make a composite sketch of the person. And when I say a composite sketch, it's not like, you have a rendering, an artist's rendering of a sketch. You have a thing called an identikit. This is what they used in Jennifer Thompson's case, which has been illustrated in the book Picking Cotton recently. Now, an identikit, as most of you are aware of, is a set of overlays, set of eyes, set of ears, set of noses. 25 are bet in one box. So you really have 25 different eyes and ears to look at. So you don't have a spectrum. So they put this together. Now, what they did in my case was they called all the witnesses in the case. Before I get to the composite, I'll tell you this. They called all the witnesses in the case and said, "Don't watch television. We have arrested a suspect, and by the way, his name is Kirk Bloodsworth." And so they ask him all weekend long. They see me being brought in and out of the arraignment hearing, just smiling, They asked me to cover my head, and I said, "No, I don't care if the whole world sees me." The prosecution took that as some sort of proud admission on my part. and because I didn't want to put a blanket over my head. I didn't do that. I haven't done anything wrong. So what they do, they put me in the lineup on Monday, and the two little boys never identified me in the lineup. It wasn't until 2 weeks later they had said, we made a mistake. It's Kirk Bloodsworth, number 6 is where I was standing. Now, back to the composite drawing. What happened was, when they were making this composite sketch, you know, I've got the 6'5" guy, and then as the trial gets started, all of a sudden, it's a 6-foot-tall, burly waterman from the Eastern Shore. It all changes. Now, when they did this composite sketch, the oldest of the two boys was not happy with the eyes. He said they were similar, but they weren't quite right. He wasn't happy with the hair, and the mustache was different. Now, the police officer asked him, what would a mustache look like? And he said, well, it kind of goes around like this. And they said, oh, you're talking about the Fu Manchu. The little boy said, I don't know what you call it, but that's what he had. The officer never put the Fu Manchu on the composite sketch. Now, that's very significant in the end of this. Well, the littlest of the two boys could not do a composite sketch. He could not figure it out. So what they do, they put the two witnesses in the same room to do the composite, which is a no-no in any law enforcement area that I've ever heard of, and believe me, I've talked to a load of them. Now, having said that, all these witnesses came to trial. They pointed me out in courtroom, one right after another, except the littlest boy. When this happened this day, Dawn went outside and was playing hide and go seek with her friends. She went outside to play with her friends that spent the night before. At about somewhere around, right after the Facts of Life went off of TV at about 10:30 a.m. on July 25th. She went outside to play. These two little boys were fishing around a pond there, and they saw Dawn come by, and she asked them to help her find her friends, and they didn't want to help. They just caught this turtle. They were more happy about that event than they were trying to help her. Somebody spoke up, and there was some man standing on a rise of a hill with the sun behind his head. Now, he was several feet above them. That could probably be why they thought he was so tall. One of the little boys asked him, why would you say he was that tall? He said, because my uncle's 6'5". So there was a big issue. Even though they had made this composite and he had seen a photo array that did not match their description of me at the time, they let me be in the lineup anyway. After that, the trial lasted about 2 weeks, and the gavel came down on my life, and the courtroom erupted in applause when he sentenced him to death. In the audience, you could hear him kill his ass and give him the gas. They partied until 4 o'clock in the morning to my death. A trial that lasted 2 weeks, one witness, and of course, my lawyer that ran in the wall said, in the end, he said, good luck, and walked away. I went to one of the most notorious prisons in the United States, and there's no prison that's not notorious. Any one of us that are sitting here, from Steve, Roy, and Darrell, know full well what I'm talking about. These places are very bad. The Maryland Penitentiary at 954 Forest Street, it looks like a Gothic castle sitting in the middle of the city. It has silver spires reaching up to the sky, 20-foot thick granite stones, and the place smelled of death and pain. I walked inside this building, and you could hear the people holler when I'm in waist chain and block. You remember that, guys? Waist chain and block and shackles on your ankles and doing that shuffle. And I could hear the calls coming, we're going to get you, Kirk. We're going to get you. Used to holler down in my vents at night. We're going to get you for what you did to that little girl. It just hit on me, dawned on me what. And I'm not using that as a pun, you know. The fact that I was accused of killing Dawn, a 9-year-old little girl, had just registered to my mind, what am I going to do? Prison life for me was terrible. I mean, it was very terrible in the beginning, but I gave as good as I got and tried to get through. And it's all illustrated in this book written by Tim Junkin, and you all can get it. And if anybody in here wants this book and gets this book, we're going to make sure you get the information so you can get it. And if you send it back to me, I will sign it personally. And it illustrates the whole case in Bloodsworth, the 2 trials, and and how it all went through. I remember I was hit in the back of the head with a sock full of batteries. I split my skull open. I got stabbed in the calf with a welding rod. I seen people get stabbed to death with a pencil over a Little Debbie snack cake. You know, prisons are bad, and it's got a lot of bad people in it. I fought my case, and eventually my case was overturned, as Larry had explained to you, based on Brady information. Brady, in this case, was about another suspect, a man who was physically 187 feet away from Dawn Hamilton's body, who found Dawn's shorts and panties in the tree and gave them to Dawn Hamilton's father, who, when they searched his station wagon, they found a pair of little girl's panties in his console of his car. And they asked him what he had them in there for. He said he was going to take them home, wash them, and give them to his daughter for her dolls. But they, the state, I say, said that that was not exculpatory because he was 2 inches shorter and 20 pounds lighter than me. Well, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals of Maryland thought otherwise. And my case was overturned and I was retried. The same people came to testify. 2 weeks later, I was convicted again, and this time sentenced to double life. Prison is a bad place, but you know, you lose a lot. All of us sitting here have lost a great deal. And I got this book written by Joseph Womble about the blooding that I have alluded to at the beginning, that told me about the first time that DNA was ever used in a criminal case. So the epiphany that I had was, if it can convict you, it can free you. So I started remembering about all these FBI and forensic reports, many spermatozoa present, close quotes, possible semen stain on panty, that the FBI, who takes a swatch out of everything, never took one out of her underpants. And in fact, it was a semen stain the size of a quarter on her underpants. We sent them to Forensic Science and Associates in California, where they did an analysis. It took me a whole year to get back the evidence. My mother died 3 months before the results came back. She was my biggest fan. She was the reason I could read to start with. And you know, you lose something like that, and I was allowed to go see her body for 5 minutes in handcuffs and shackles and go home and go back to the only home I knew for the last almost 9 years, and that was the Maryland Penitentiary, an innocent man. I was sitting in my cell one day in April, and I was thinking about my mother, and it was right around about a few months after she had passed away. And a guard had stuck a Post-it note in my cell. It said, I still have it. It says, urgent, call your attorney. Urgent, probably the same conversation you and Darryl and everybody else in here has had. Urgent, call your attorney. So I go on the phone, and Bob Morin, who was my lawyer in the end, who is a judge now in Washington, D.C. at the Superior Court, he was, if you ever met him, he's like as mild-mannered a man as you ever want to meet. He's very soft-spoken. I always thought, how in the world a judge could hear him in the courtroom? But he was screaming on the other end of the phone. Kirk, you're innocent, man. You're innocent. I said, I know that. Tell me something I don't know, like when I'm getting out of here. He said, the FBI has to retest. But on June 26th of that year of 1993, William Sessions from the FBI called Ann Brooks, my prosecuting attorney, and told her, he said, you better let him out. And on June 28th, 1993, I stepped out of the Maryland prison system, a free man, for the first time. And I wasn't, it was a day later, I was on Larry King. And I look back at that tape before I came up here, and it's amazing. I can't shut up today, but back then I was as mute as I don't know. I was just sitting there with this jailhouse tan looking at Larry like, oh my God, I'm really here. And, I was thinking about crab eating, crab cakes and crab balls and crab soup and a couple beers. And actually, I was thinking about a lot of beers, but I wanted to enjoy my life, wanted to be free again. But back in those days, DNA wasn't looked at it like it is the important science it is today. It was looked at as a shaman science back then. Some get out of jail free card, some technicality type of thing. Nobody wanted to listen to me. I remember I had people writing child killer in this dirt on my truck, calling my wife up all hours of the night and early in the morning. We're going to kill your husband because he got away with murder. I couldn't even talk to people in grocery stores and restaurants, and let alone dating. That was something else, in the beginning. It was hard to do, all this was so difficult. So I got so frustrated in 1994 after I had been compensated $300,000 for my trouble, which after $175,000 of lawyer fees and investigative work and paying my father back was gone. I had to get on and find out. The one thing that I wanted to find out most of all, who killed Dawn Hamilton. That stuck in, it was inbred in me like a laser into my conscience and into my life. I had to find out who killed her, and if they didn't want to do it, I was going to help them do it. So I called Ann Brooks, the prosecuting attorney, and I asked her, I said, there's this new stuff out. Let's take the test. It's called a CODIS database, combined DNA index system that we've all heard about. Let's submit the typed evidence that they already have. Now, they were so interested in finding this information out that do you think they did it in 1995? No. They didn't do it until the fall of 2003. At the same time, Daryl was getting ready to be released. Now, I was sitting on the phone and, I'll have that caller ID thing, And on the caller ID it said, Baltimore County Government. I thought the last time I talked to these people it didn't turn out too well. But I answered the phone and it was that same woman that called me a monster in court, and she said, Kirk, I have an update on the Hamilton murder case. I'm Ann Brooks. So I said the only thing I could say to her at the time, what do you want me to do? What can I help you with? You all thought I was going to say something else. Yeah. But truly, she said, I want to meet you on the case, and I'll meet you anywhere in the state, but I can't tell you over the telephone. What is with these people? So I met her at the Burger King. I like poppers. What can I tell you? She sat there and she told me that they had a cold hit in the CODIS database of a man that had come up, and his name was Kimberly Shea Ruffner. Kimberly Shea Ruffner, by the way, was not 6'5". He was 5'6" and 160 pounds. And Mr. Ruffner lived in the same prison with me in the same tier for 5 years. I gave him library books and helped him lift weights, and he never said a word to me. He said he didn't know what I was in there for, but he remembered everything else except that fact. I always tell people that if you can kill a 9-year-old child, you have no problem with lying. But in May of 2004, he got life in prison. And he was arrested 3 weeks off of my case after I was arrested, and for attempted rape of a woman in Fells Point. He was released from prison 2 weeks before Dawn Hamilton's murder for 2 attempted rapes of 2 other little girls in the Fells Point area, and he slipped through the cracks. There was one report that we didn't find until we started writing this book, and it was about a woman who named Constantine that wanted to report a person in her neighborhood that was accused of the Fells Point rapes, and the police never went to go back and check. And less than an inch of paragraph told them what to do, and they never went back. So as lawyers, I think we all, people who are lawyers should look at everything, and the police, in fact, should follow up on that. I have worked with an organization called the Justice Project, and we started this in the year 2000 when I promoted the Innocent Protection Act. It's a piece of federal legislation that would help people like Daryl and Roy and Steve, all of us, and other people who would get post-conviction DNA testing that the state wouldn't have. And the testing program is a federal program run by the Department of Justice called the Kirk Bloodsworth Post-Conviction DNA Testing Program. And I am happy to report to all of you that $7.8 million of the 14 that it got went out last year to places like Arizona, Texas, Kentucky, and Washington State, and Virginia. So we're working very hard to do that. And the Justice Project just came out with a lot of policy issues. We work with policy people like Senator Patrick Leahy to Orrin Hatch of Utah. We're not partisan to one side or the other. We're a nonpartisan group, and it makes real sense to do the best thing to protect people like us. If we don't, we're going to be in a worse shape. As far as I'm concerned, the criminal justice system is broken, and we really desperately need to stop the errors. There's been 130 death row inmates who have been exonerated, some 234, right, Daryl, of DNA exonerations through the country. Excuse me, 35. I have to keep constant track, because it happens all the time. So if you look at it in the big picture of the exonerees from death row, only 17 of those are DNA exonerations. So you have to have other reforms in the criminal justice system, like proper lineup procedures, the way we do interrogations, the way we collect evidence, and we must have standards to preserve different types of DNA evidence and keep it for perpetually until the trial is concluded, or the case is over with, or the defendant has passed. Now, I guess got to tell you all that I started a new program. It's called the Kirk Bloodsworth Public Education Program. It's run by the Justice Project. You can look up on our website if anybody ever wants to do this. We are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 that are granted, to get funds to keep me being able to go out and others to raise awareness about the criminal justice reform and all its issues. In closing, I want to tell all of you that you must stand up for justice. You must stand up for what's right. Integrity and honesty in all things is so important in this day and age, in this time we are sitting in. No more important is people like myself, Daryl, Roy, and Steve that cannot stand by and sit down. We must stand up. We all must stand up for what is right in life. Even though it might not seem like the public wants us to, but you still must stand up. Right is light. If you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything, my mother used to say. You must stand up for integrity, honesty, and justice. But by all means, when you stand up, take a look behind you and don't run into that wall. Thank you very much.